Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you so much for tuning into the program. It's Wednesday, May the 1st. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams. He's produced the program. Let's get it going. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So the Leafs and Leafs fan get to fight another day. A 2-1 victory last night in Boston. Pretty clutch stuff. No Austin Matthews in the lineup, so Game 6 tomorrow night back in Toronto. I don't know if you're watching any tennis. I love tennis. So yesterday at the Madrid Open, Felix Auger-Aliassime, who Canadian, at one point he was in top 8 in the world. A couple of years ago he played in the ATP finals, which is only for the top 8 players. Now he's had a bit of a sluggish year or and a half, but yesterday beat Casper Ruud to advance to the quarterfinals. Now Casper Ruud just won in Barcelona, defeating the Greek Stefan Tsitsipas. So this is a huge victory for Felix. Now he's up against it in the quarters, takes on world number 1 Italian Yannick Sinner, but that's a great result at Madrid. And Madrid, so how they classify it is at the top of the rung is the majors, the Grand Slam tournaments. Then it's what they call the ATP 1000s, of which Madrid is one. Then the 500s and then some regular tour events. So big win for him. A couple of quick baseball notes to ease in here this morning. On this date, 1991, A's outfielder Ricky Henderson seals all-time Major League record of 939 bases, 7-4 win versus New York Yankees in Oakland. For context, Henderson finished his career with 1,406 stolen bases. Second on the list, Lou Brock, with just 938. For active base stealers, a guy named Starlin Marte's got 344. Jose Altuve, 297. Trey Turner, 267. None of those numbers put even in the top 100 of career stolen bases, but they're starting to run a little bit more. And on this date, 1991, Texas Rangers starter Nolan Ryan pitches his Major League record 7th no-hitter, beat Toronto 3-0. He was 44 years of age, so it's the 7th no-hitter, the oldest person to ever throw a no-hitter. Second on that list is Sandy Koufax with 4. Anyway, let's keep going. All right, so it's May Day, or International Workers' Day. 138 years ago, organized labor unions around the world demanding better working conditions and, of course, world peace. So one of the key features of their demands was an 8-hour workday. So the Federation of Organized Trades and Labor Unions in the United States and elsewhere, they staged a general strike on this day in 1886. There were riots, but eventually they got what they were looking for, the official sanction of the 8-hour workday. So if any organized labor would like to chime in, we can talk about that on the show today. Speaking of organized labor, and the licensed practical nurses represented by NAPE. So you've probably seen the story in the media where this one LPN in particular feels like she was forced out of the public system. Underpaid, overworked, didn't have the type of respect she believes should be afforded to her and her profession. So we all understand the concerns around the travel nurse. She left her job in the public system to become a travel nurse. And the story was really catching the big headlines across the country. You know, the $36.5 million paid to the travel nurse agencies within a few months, and silly things like cable bills and a variety of other travel expenses. And someone got their dog flown and those types of things. But here's some of the context. So over the course of the past 6 years, the scope of practice has expanded for licensed practical nurses, but the rate of pay has not. So nobody wants to do more and not get paid more. I think that's just nature of the beast. So here we go. The maximum amount registered nurses can make is $71 an hour, while LPNs can make only around $32 an hour. They're doing pretty similar tasks, if not the exact same task. Now, yes, there's a different level of schooling and requirements to become a registered nurse, but it's just another glaring example of, yes, when we talk about maximizing scope of practice to ease the burden on the system, it just makes sense, whether it be for pharmacists or LPNs or nurse practitioners, whatever the case may be. But then we've got a absolute distinct shortage in a variety of these areas. So again, working shoulder to shoulder on 4 North B with someone who's basically doing the exact same thing as you are, as an RN versus a travel nurse, or an LPN versus a registered nurse, of course those tensions are having people think about leaving the public system. In addition to that, it's probably very good news that we're seeing a reduction in our dependence on travel nurses. But the problem was, and now I knew about this because I asked the minister directly, but apparently the union and many nurses who left the public system went to the travel agencies, coming back to the public system. In their so-called non-compete, they can't come back to the public system for 12 months. It was put there to act as a deterrent for leaving the public system, but apparently, unbeknownst to the leadership at the union and individual RNs, they're finding out the hard way. So we've created a whip for our own tail. It would have been pretty helpful if that deterrent was well understood, so maybe fewer would have left the public system. But if they didn't know, and now they want to come back in, even though we have a shortage, the non-compete says they can't come back for 12 months. I mean, the breakdown of communication is just absolutely maddening. All right. So what did the sign say? Long-haired freaky people need not apply. That's a different sign. So here's what the sign reads that was simply posted outside the Colonial Building grounds. No temporary, semi-permanent or structures, no loitering, no open flames, unauthorized structures and property will be removed by the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. If you are experiencing homelessness, please call the toll-free 1-833-724-2444. Okay, so tent city is coming to an end. Announcement made by Transportation Minister John Abbott and Housing Minister Fred Hutton. All right. So I guess one of the first questions will be, if they're dispersed, and they're talking about taking away the tents, they say they're not at the point yet where maybe taking away people, but it's going to come to that. I mean, this was always going to be the eventuality. People will talk about, well, here comes tourist season, and, we heard from Mr. Abbott all the way back in December that tent city would be dealt with by Christmas. That didn't happen. So a lot of confusing things here. I understand that this was always going to be the case, but if not there, where? That'll be one concern. Is this going to arrive at a point where people are being physically removed from the site? You have to think there's a distinct possibility that may come to pass. So it looks like tent city's done. Here's the concern. So we've heard from many of the advocates. Well, I've actually heard from some family members. We heard from one of the people living down there some weeks or months back. And it's the confusion about what's actually being offered. Can we just simply get an honest answer to this? So people there and advocates for are saying they're only being offered these emergency shelters. And many have had experience with the emergency shelters, and that's not an option they're willing to take. So the government goes on to say that they've been offered emergency shelters, transitional housing, and hotels. So which is it? In the world of transitional housing, has anybody been offered a spot at the Old Comfort Inn? Yes or no? Other hotels? Yes or no? So yes, there's going to be people who don't want any help, but there's going to be people there who need and do want some help. And permanent solutions for long-term housing is not a simple affair. Can't be done overnight. So what is actually going on here? Can someone please tell us exactly what's being offered and what the responses have been? And if it's just emergency shelters, we already know that's a non-starter for many of them. And this was always going to be the case. My worry is not only if not there, where, is are we going to arrive at a point where we have physical altercations, people being forcibly removed from the site? Because there's going to be people who do not want to leave. So then what? Are we just going to see the rebirth of the tents across the street from the Confederation building? Like, where's this going? Period. Now, I've seen the full gamut of reactions. People are angry, people are applauding, people are concerned, people are frustrated. Whatever label you want to attach to it, there is going to be some outcomes here that might not be that great for anybody. What do you think? Let's talk about it if you're so inclined. And let's go to Gander, talk about housing, because it's not just in the city of St. John's. It was last summer or the summer before, there were some 40 people in that community that were living in hotels. Eventually, coming to tourism season, they were removed and sent elsewhere. So now the town of Gander, back in 2022, bought a 15,000 square foot church in an effort to try to create some sort of shelter to deal with their own homelessness problem. The problem for the mayor, Percy Farwell, is that they're unable to get the provincial government to get on side with some assistance in funding. So they're talking about needing $2 million. The minister responsible, Fred Hutton, says that there hasn't been a careful evaluation done by an engineer or an architect to talk about what the total pot of money for a safe refurbishment would be. But Mayor Farwell, on track with this one particular one. He says the government was quick enough to come up with a 3-year, $21 million solution at the Comfort Inn here in the city, but not so much for his community's homelessness issue. He goes on to say that the province is the entity with the mandate to provide housing, not municipalities, but he says the province should provide capital and core funding for the project and match the $187,000 annual funding it provides for other community centres in the province, including buildings in Marystown, Exploits, and of course several here in the capital city. So that is indisputable comment coming from the mayor. So why is it that some regions are being favoured over others when in fact the concern with homelessness or people who are living in very precarious situations are the same people in different pockets of the province? So, okay, if the examination for the safe refurbishment has not been completed, even if we just get back to this core funding to be matched at $187,000, and so Mayor Farwell, if you're interested in coming on, you're more than welcome to join us here this morning. All right, let's change gears. So, ride sharing coming to town, much to the chagrin of traditional cab companies, even though those cabbies can move off to be Uber drivers if they're so inclined. I don't know what percentage of the population wants, but here it comes. And Uber has launched and actively trying to recruit drivers. Just a cautionary tale. And you can do your own investigation. If you're interested in being an Uber driver as a side hustle, good for you. But here's a story coming from Cleveland, Ohio. So this one fellow who's been driving for Uber since 2017, he's had a pretty good run at it. But here's some numbers for your consideration. And these are all in American dollars. Last year, George made more than $109,000 in gross earnings as an Uber driver. And that's according to documents provided by the company. But after Uber's commissions, car maintenance, gas, and miscellaneous driving expenses were accounted for, he took home roughly $17,000, about 16% of his gross earnings. In 2021, he brought home 19%. So apparently, it's getting worse year over year. So he says he drives about 45 to 55 hours in a typical week, and at the outcome, he makes about $17 an hour. But that's dropping year over year. So they're accusing this ride-sharing or ride-hailing app as taking a larger cut of the rider fares year over year. So there's no guaranteed of any amount of money to be paid to an Uber driver. But if it's getting worse, if you're considering it, just look around at some of these stories. Not to say that it might not be beneficial to your bottom line and to top up your weekly, monthly, annual earnings, but factor in some of the fares that are clawed back by Uber itself. So that's once again, a cautionary tale that it's changing. We've seen some massive walkaways from driving for Uber, like for instance down in the Twin Cities metro area, Minnesota, Minneapolis. They stage a big problem. Those drivers in that region were making about $14 an hour after expenses. So, you know, and that does not always include insurance costs and other things associated with being an Uber driver. You want to talk about it. And if you've been experienced as someone who's put your car on the ride-sharing app called Turo, which was pretty successful for many people here in the province last year, because we know there's a shortage of rental cars. So maybe the province, as part of our tourism advertisements, can also say, you know, the rental car, I don't know how you craft this word-wise, but if there's a rental car shortage, we do indeed have people here that are using Turo. So maybe have a look at that application to ease your worried mind about being able to find a rental. You want to take it on? All right, we can do it. How are we doing out there, Dave? So the deadline is approaching for nominations to be voted in as member of the FFAW Executive Board. Not exactly sure what positions are up. Okay, so they're going to share some of the information starting today. The deadline for nominations is May 22nd. Here's one basic question I would have. Remember when Fish and L was taking a stab at creating their own union for harvesters alone? And it didn't get where they were hoping to go. But at that time, folks who were vocal, obvious supporters of Fish and L were unable to run for executive positions. So what's going to be the case now? I know Fish and L is not a thing anymore, but there's lots of voices out there who were once big Fish and L-ers who are still speaking out against the union. Are they going to be denied the possibility to be nominated and consequently voted on to possibly be a member of the executive board? So if we can get some clarification there from the union, that would be helpful as well. Rolling on. When we talk about the Residential Tenancies Act, and of course, there is the ability for an arbitrator to look at case-by-case basis and to evaluate who might be in the wrong, either the landlord or the tenant. And yes, there's a fine mechanism in place, but that has been basically useless because no fines have ever been levied, because the arbitrator doesn't have the authority. So people have to go to court if they're so inclined. Same thing inside consumer protection. PC member for Harbour, Maine, Helen Conway-Ottenheimer, is talking about the Consumer Protection Act that needs to be beefed up here in this province. She's not wrong. We had a call just yesterday from Cyril, talked about the fact that he had bought a unit from Atlantic HVAC, and of course that's a defunct operation. People have been left holding the bag, no access possibly to some repairs inside their 12-year warranty, so that's one thing. But the same thing for consumer protection. So the Act does allow for fines and for some potentially informal resolution, whether it be money to be paid back or some other arrangement between a company and whoever purchased their product. But the fact of the matter is, apparently, there's never been a fine levied. So some changes have to be made here. The basics it boils down to. If an individual, even if there's some sort of potential resolution, but no rebate or refund offered, yes, people have the ability to take the company to court, but that's not how we should be handling this. The government really does owe us some better consumer protection. There's going to be companies that just go sideways and run out of money and go bankrupt. But then there's also the concept of people acting in complete bad faith. No intention of living up to their obligations. And consequently, if there is no teeth, and I think Ms. Conway-Ottenheimer referred to it as a toothless tiger, again, she's not wrong. So let's change the way we do business here. You can't leave it up to the individual to take on anybody, especially some sort of corporation, because they can kind of bleed you dry with time and money. So, again, let's beef up the legislation to do what it's intended to do. Not just on paper, but in reality. Residential Tenancies Act, consumer protection. I think it's a worthwhile endeavour that we could all benefit from. Who wants to be left holding the bag? Money's hard to come by. Things are expensive. It's only getting worse. So I think Ms. Conway-Ottenheimer is on the right track there. Okay. Thankfully, we have Dr. Shane Roberts coming up on the show at some point. I'm not sure what time. He's the president of the Newfoundland Labrador Dental Association. Beginning today, Canadian seniors 70 and older are going to be able to avail of the Canada Dental Care Plan. Still plenty of questions. Now, the portal opens up for folks aged 65 to 69 today, but they're going to have to wait a month or so before they're able to access care. There's confusion about holding private insurance. There's confusion amongst dentists and denturists and hygienists about signing up and the cumbersome administrative burden apparently attached to this program. Just for context, there are over 30,500 oral health care professionals who could sign up to offer the program, including roughly 26,500 dentists, 1,700 independent hygienists, and 2,400 denturists. Who have signed up? About 5,000. That's about 16% of healthcare professionals in the country. Then, acknowledging that, Federal Health Minister Mark Holland said, you don't have to sign up to be able to offer the care you can bill directly. So which is it? And if that's the case, why would anyone sign up? So the government has brought in Sun Life to administer the plan. So if you're looking to see whether or not your dentist has signed up, they've launched a searchable database, which is of course helpful. But one of the questions would be, why would anyone sign up? Right? If you don't have to, and you can reduce your administrative burden and offer the care anyway under the care plan, then you would imagine many people would see that as a better, a preferable outcome or relationship. Then it's what's covered, what's not. So if you have a net family household income of $90,000 or less, you're eligible. If you have $70,000 or less, there won't be a copay. Then there's questions about what is actually covered and when will it be covered. So I'm not going to take all the ammo away from Dr. Roberts. We'll ask the questions of him. If you want to pose any through me for him, we'll try to make sure we include them as best we can. All right, there's a few I wanted to get to here, but a couple of quick ones. It's not just yesterday, but it's many days. The shenanigans and the goings-on in the House of Commons is ridiculous. Speaker Greg Fergus has completely lost control. So back and forth between the Prime Minister and Mr. Poilievre yesterday, the Prime Minister accusing him of cozying up the white nationalists and all the rest of it. Mr. Poilievre talking about the Prime Minister being wacko, and apparently that was what broke the camel's back insofar as Speaker Fergus is concerned. So he ejected Poilievre, asked him to withdraw the comment, and he wouldn't. And so in the past, there's been a variety of politicians, including the Prime Minister, including Mr. Poilievre and others, who have acted quite boorishly in the House of Commons. So yesterday, Mr. Poilievre gets ejected. And another one of his members also got ejected. And then there was the entire Conservative caucus walks out. So number one, the Speaker's lost control in full. And I would suggest that there's enough hard work to be done the grunt work behind the scenes that really does accommodate the people's business has been lacking sorely, provincially and federally, for far too long. Political theatre is exhausting. There will be people that fall for it and say, oh, this is great, talk tough and all that. Talking tough and looking for a soundbite is not getting anything done. I mean, if you think that the country is in a bad place, you think things are broken, you think things need to improve, then maybe, just maybe, as opposed to what we see in the House of Commons amongst a group that should be well-paid professionals, what is your problem? Do the work. I wish politics was boring. Now, of course, it's quite exciting with the theatre and the shenanigans and the dim-witted barbs that fly around, and whether it be the House of Assembly or the House of Commons. The fact of the matter is, regardless of the party you support, things aren't getting done because we're focusing in on that bloody nonsense. Anyway, you want to take it on? Let's go. There's a couple more I wanted to get to, but first we're on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. Oh, there you go. Good. To kick off the show right after the break is the president of the Newfoundland and Labrador Dental Association. That's Dr. Shane Roberts. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Well, the federal government announced a $13 billion dental plan over the course of 5 years. For seniors 70 and over, it begins today. Still some questions out there that are looming and yet to be answered. Join us on line number one is the president of the Newfoundland and Labrador Dental Association. That's Dr. Shane Roberts. Dr. Roberts, you're on the air.
Well, thank you for having me, sir.
Happy to have you in the program.
To talk about that.
Yeah, so, with all of the questions that are out there and the confusion that remains, I'm not even really sure to start. But if we know that there's some 26,500 dentists in the country and added to, some 30,000 plus dental professionals, only 60% have signed up. The federal government has said that you don't have to enroll to be able to offer the service. My question would be, why would anyone sign up?
Well, right now, one of the things that we're concerned with, of course, is the administrative burden with respect to how the program runs. Signing up, what they've called their alternative pathway, it will still come with the same terms and conditions associated with the original signing in or opting in program. They haven't really clarified what that means. And the problem that we have with the administrative part, we've always talked about the additional processes and paperwork. Will we have the staff to actually do this? And then under the terms and conditions, what's unique about running this program is that they have the ability to unilaterally change the program if they wish, if we decide to sign up. So in a scenario where you have a claim-by-claim basis, if those terms and conditions still exist, then why would you even use that claim procedure? Why wouldn't you just sign up? So that it's really confusing for providers right now, and some of the things that they said are worrisome to us. So in terms of a participation model, a lot of people are still in the air, the dentists that is, about how they wish to do that.
And then we see, in addition to that, so inside the 5,000 that have signed up, some of them say they're not going to participate right away. They're going to wait to see how things unfold for other dentists. And I suppose inside your dental community, people have an understanding about exactly how it's working. So do you have an answer to the basics of, if I enroll as a dentist, what that looks like insofar as paperwork or administration goes, versus if I don't sign up but I do provide the care? They talk about billing Sun Life directly. Do you understand what the difference in administration would be, one versus the other?
No clarity yet. That's the problem, and this is the problem we've had so far along the way is that everything has been rolled out very quickly, and details are lacking often. So for us to interpret it without the details, to do the math, to do the calculus, is very difficult when you don't have all the variables. In particular, this alternate pathway only was addressed to us or brought out 2 weeks ago. So to interpret what that means without even the extra information is still up in the air. I guess the biggest concern I have now, considering today is the first day, is what's the patient experience going to be this next week, this next month, and those are the things I really wanted to focus on, because the expectation when you come to the clinic, I just want patients to know before you go what you're going to expect because of the implications of the policy design. So, for instance, right now, before you go, first thing any patient should do, those that are enrolled and that are eligible and they have a start date, talk to the administrative staff Know what your out-of-pocket costs will be before you even go to that first appointment. And once you get there, speak with your dentist, make your informed decisions about your plan, and then again, know what your costs will be out of pocket. There are two things about this program that are very, very important. Number one, you have to see a provider. You can't get reimbursed as a patient directly from Sun Life. So as a barrier, of course, if we don't participate, that's going to be a problem. Number two, despite what's been said in the media, this is not free dentistry. It's a great supplement. It will cover parts of what you have in terms of your services. But in Newfoundland and Labrador, the funding ratio is about 80 to 85% of what our customary fees would be. So out of pocket, very likely you'll spend between 15 and 20% yourself on top of what you would have as a copay. So those are the two takeaways from the program as it is now administratively based on what Health Canada has brought. So I just want to be very clear about that so patients are not, talking to the frontline staff and we don't want people getting angry with the staff because of decisions Health Canada has made.
Right, and for dentists that haven't enrolled, even if they provide the care, that opportunity is not available until July, so people have to understand that as well. And on top of it, they talk about covering x-rays and fillings and cleanings, root canals, dentures, but if you talk about other services, more complex services like partial dentures and crowns, that's not going to be available until November. So there's still a lot of these inner workings that are not fully understood, I would imagine, inside the general public.
Well, even the, when you talk about partial dentures and even crowns and bridges, that criteria for those are very stringent. And that's not going to start until November. And that pre-authorization or that sending paperwork, that's an onerous issue because that takes a lot of time to do. Now, we do that for people with regular insurances as well, but we don't have any feedback yet as to how this is going to work. So that's when I say how it's going to work, what the time frame is, what the extra paperwork is, what the denial rate will be. And so we don't want to get people's expectations up too high that things will be covered when, quite frankly, they may not be. And then at the end of the day, who's going to take the brunt of that again? It's the dentist. It's not Health Canada. So we want to be very clear with patients up front. These are the limits of this program. Great benefit. However, just be very aware that some things won't be covered.
Can you give us some specific examples of relatively common procedures that will not be covered in full or even in part?
Well, one of the things that they've always said is that they want to focus on prevention for this program. So, you're going to go in for your cleaning and have things, the term we call is scaling. So for someone who hasn't seen a dentist in 20 years, and this is the reference they keep using, you may need to see your hygienist or your dentist, for hours worth of work. Right now under the program, the limitation would be for what we call 4 units or 4 15-minute sections, which is 1 hour maximum. And that's for the whole year. That's not, 2 times per year. So in terms of comparing it to a regular insurance, it's totally different. One of the other ones that concerns us is a preventative measure that many of you may be aware of, which is those bite planes, those guards we wear for people who grind their teeth for, your TMJ issues. They won't be covered either. And that's a preventative measure. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's other little minutiae there that concern us with respect to frequency or how often things can be done.
Of which we don't know if there's a cap or not. And I've asked that question directly of the federal government, no answer forthcoming. Then there's the concern of, can you couple this with already existing provincial plans? And then there's the concern if you have private insurance. At the onset is even if you had private insurance but did not tick the dental box, you were deemed ineligible. They've now said that's not the case, and even if you purchase private insurance, you will eventually become ineligible when your program or your policy is no longer in effect. For many people, they don't know if that's fit to eat. They don't even know what that means. So can you help us understand the implications, whether it be with existing provincial plans and or private insurance?
Well, with provincial plan, we've got some clarity on that one. And this one, of course, we're limited in our provincial plan to a low-income plan and a children's plan. So those plans actually will work basically like the term they use is the payer of last resort. So what that means is that the CDCP will act like a pseudo insurance. It will be billed first, and then secondarily MCP will be paid. Will pay the second part of that, like someone who has 2 or 3 insurance policies. So we have no concerns with our current provincial program. We've had good clarity there. With respect to the other plans, they've updated their information on eligibility multiple times, and one of the ones that they put on there is, coverage purchased by you or your family member through a group plan for benefits. And then they put in dates like, you opt out of your pension benefits by December 11th, 2023, then you could be eligible. It's all confusing. We do this for a living, and I read through it, and we have to ask each other, our colleagues, like, what does that mean? And if we have to ask that, then for patients, it's unbelievably difficult. So the clarity in the message is not there for most part, and that's one of the problems we run in for frontline staff, because patients will ask us for clarity, and we don't know what to tell them often when we read through some of this information.
And I suppose we could have started here, but maybe this is the last question. People also think that simply because I'm a senior over the age of 70 and have a net family income of less than $90,000, I can simply walk into the dentist's office and say, here I am, and I need this work done, and you're going to build Sun Life on my behalf. But you have to apply and get an individualized number, right?
Correct. So before you go to the office, what you'll have, once you apply, you will get a welcome kit from Sun Life. Sun Life will give you all the information. This includes your member card and a coverage start date. Nothing can be reimbursed to your dentist until that coverage start date's in effect. So those are the most important things to know. Following that, those other 2 points that I made, number one, you need to see a participating provider. You can't get reimbursed directly from Sun Life. And number two, the dentistry will not be free. You will likely have out-of-pocket expenses, again, in the range of 15 to 20%, and likely you'll see that for most participating providers across Newfoundland. So have those conversations with the administrative staff and with your dental provider when you see them, because that's very important. I just want to temper the expectations that, this is not free, and that the burden of this, we don't want to have our front staff stressed to the max because people are really mad at them for things they have no control over. This is Health Canada's program. It's their program.
Before we go, do you have any idea just what percentage or how many professionals have signed up or enrolled in the program as of yet in this province?
So I looked this morning, actually, and roughly about 65 out of about 280. That's where we are right now. There are a few denturists on there as well, and a few independent hygienists. But in terms of distribution, most are going to be in the major centres, St. John's, Grand Falls, Gander, Labrador City, and in Corner Brook. In the rural areas, hard to say because those are satellite clinics. Many of them are the same dentists that own one clinic in a major center in a satellite area, so there's a lot of overlap. The provider search engine that they have is it's not very good, but that's where you are now. And as you said earlier, once we see how our colleagues do, likely in Newfoundland you'll see participation rates increase. But I'd ask that everyone be patient because it's probably going to be end of June, July before most of us will make that decision based on how well this goes. So if Sun Life and Health Canada do well with the program, you probably will see an uptick. But there will always be areas where there is no providers. That, unfortunately, will happen.
Dental care deserts. Can you give us those numbers one more time, Doctor?
Roughly 65 for dentists right now. And I think there was 4 of the dentists were specialists. Those are pedodontists or kid specialists. And there's about 6 independent hygienists and denturists. I'm not sure. I think I saw one name there this morning when I looked.
And it was 65? 65 out of how many? Pardon me?
280, roughly.
So better than the national average, but still some confusion and hesitancy out there. Dr. Roberts, I appreciate your time. Hopefully this has tempered some expectations, because the last thing we need is for emotions to bubble over inside clinics, because people thought they were getting something, they got something different.
Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye. That's Dr. Shane Roberts. He's the president of the Newfoundland Labrador Dental Association. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 2. John, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you today?
Doing okay, thanks. How about you?
Oh, all right. You know something? The sun is coming out in Mount Pearl.
Yeah, it's starting to get a little brighter here on Kenmount Road as well. When I started the show, I couldn't see Kenmount Terrace. Now I can.
We should take a picture.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, that's not what the reason I called you.
Okay.
The reason I called you is because for the past wee while, weeks and stuff, I first started getting stuff about our pension, OAS and Canada pension things. And most of us who have lived on OAS or pension for quite a while. There's a thing comes through. My wife got it on Google News, and it's all over YouTube about from PTET about double payments on Canada Pension and OAS. And in one of the sites it says that Seamus O'Regan has signed off on it, even though they spelled his name wrong, and that also that the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has signed off on double payments on Canada Pension and OAS. And amongst quite a few of my friends who are seniors and have been living on the same thing for God knows how long, we don't know whether to believe it or not.
Don't. So the amount that you can get, maximum benefits in 2024, has been raised, but modestly, to $68,500. Last year was $66,600. So that's a relatively modest increase. There have been some changes to maximum contribution limits as well. There was, of course, an adjustment made to old age security as well, but nowhere in the neighborhood of double. So I think the eligible beneficiaries' potential increase in OAS about 4%. So those are the numbers, not doubles.
Well, yeah, and I mean, they go on about it like, and of course, all our seniors who have been living on the same amount for quite a while, and that because of cost of living and everything else, we're to the point where we can't afford to do anything, and it makes it sound like you see the YouTube videos. You got people dancing for joy and everything because it's going up like $2,000 a month.
No, and then of course the increase for contributions is, I think it's around $3,900. It's about $112 or $113 increase over the previous year. So those are the numbers. Maximum benefits. Pardon me.
Past the time for making contributions.
No, I'm just giving information for people listening to the program. So the maximum benefit, $68,500, up from $66,600 last year. That's the number there. Old age security, about 4%.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like it makes it sound like it says that firstly it's a one-time payment on one of the I think it's on Canada Pension or OAS, and the other one is going up like $1,100 a month. I mean, it's like, and it's all over the place on there. And we're friends of mine who I spoke to, some of them never heard tell of it, and we don't know what to believe, and it's hard to figure out whether we should be dancing for joy or...
No, I think you should temper your dancing. There was a one-time payment top-up coming. I think it was supposed to actually happen in April, if I'm not mistaken, and it was in and around $1,000.
It didn't happen.
Okay.
I mean, most of us got our pensions on the 26th, and that's when it varies, 3-day banking days or something like that before the end of the month, and we got our pensions this month on the 26th of April. Of course, now we're into May, and some of us we haven't gotten any increases in it, and. And if you look at the YouTube things, there's all, they show people, oh my God, they're all over it, because, like I say, most of us haven't had any increases in our pension since we went on pension. And, it'd be, and then again, I recognize it may be your friend before me said it sounds like something that might come from the opposition, but why would the opposition be praising up Seamus O'Regan, whose name is wrong?
They wouldn't.
And Justin Trudeau.
They wouldn't, is the basics. So I'm not sure why that top up, because not every senior is eligible. There's something called maybe as simple as a senior's benefit. I know that's what it's called here in this province. There was an additional 15%, but that only impacted about 55,000 seniors. So maybe it's an eligibility issue. And pensions, some people have the luxury of having their pension indexed to consumer price index, but even when and if pensions are adjusted upwards on that front, when compared to cost of living pressures, inflation included, and interest rates included, then it's not covering the increase that we're all experiencing, whether it be at the grocery store or elsewhere. John, I got to get going here to the break, but I'll give you the final thoughts. Go ahead.
Oh, well, that's basically what I was hoping you could find out an answer, because, I mean, to some of this...
Understood.
There's a lot of us who were, of course, would welcome this like you wouldn't believe, and then a lot of the other cynics think that it's a method of Justin and whatever try to buy our seniors' vote. But I mean, I don't, I'm just we're flooded with it.
Well, I gave you the most accurate information I could just then. I know it's probably not what people wanted to hear about the big, luxurious doublings, but that's not the reality. John, I'm off to the break. I appreciate your time. Hopefully that helped.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, the land sales have been issued by the CNLOPB. Last year came up dry. This year, even a larger package being offered. Rob Strong, right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Last year, 2023, the CNLOPB land sales offering 28 parcels, 7 million hectares in the eastern region, 19 parcels, 5 million hectares in the southeastern region. No takers. This year, the offering is even bigger. To discuss the CNLOP land sales and the activity in the harbours, our friend Rob Strong. Good morning, Rob. You're on the air.
Hey, Patty. Good morning to you.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah, you're correct. It was lousy bid results last couple of years. However, this year we have another go at a lot of the parcels that were offered in previous years. There's a total of 41 parcels being offered, and these are mostly lands in the Jeanne d'Arc Basin, the area around Hibernia, Hebron, Terra Nova, White Rose, that area. And so they've been offered before. There hasn't been much uptake. However, there's 9 new parcels out around the Orphan Basin. And that's the northeast. That's sort of northeast of the Jeanne d'Arc Basin. And interesting, Patty, included in that area, in those 9 blocks, are the 2 blocks of acreage that a company called BHP had bid on about 4 or 5 years ago. Record bid, $822 million. And what happened there? BHP was bought out by another Australian company. And they decided to relinquish and paid, I think it was, they paid $192 million to walk away from the acreage. So obviously BHP was a Australian oil and gas company and mining company. So they're not a two-bit company at all, but they felt that it was worth an $800 million bid, so maybe this time other people will think the same thing and we'll get some bids there, because it moves away. It's deeper water. Logistically, it's challenging, but that's the history of our oil and gas industry. The low-hanging fruit's already been picked as such.
Yeah, now, I was a little surprised that move was made, and correct me if I'm wrong, because inside being awarded the winning bid, it comes with a 9-year license. I think in the first 6 years you have to make the commitment of X amount of money to be spent on exploration before you lose the license itself. Is that? That's
correct. I think, I'm not sure if it's 5 or 6 years, but you have to drill a well in the first 5 or 6 years, and then you can continue on with the acreage. So they did not drill a well, and they had to forfeit 25% of their bid expenditure, or their work expenditure commitment. And as I said, that was $800 million. So that's where the $192 million came in. That reverts back to the CNLOPB, which I'm assuming then reverts back to the CNLOPB's 2 masters, the federal government and provincial government. But I think it stays within the province. I certainly hope it does anyway.
Hasn't the provincial government walked away from that 25% commitment?
Good question. I don't know.
I think when we saw...
Happily, I've reached a stage in life where I'm not ashamed to say I don't know.
Oh, I say I don't know more often than not. Yeah, I believe they changed their tune on that because of some of the sluggish land sales years that we've experienced, because it's not that long ago that we saw 8 new entrants come into the industry. Record sales for individual parcels, record sales for annual sales, and now all of a sudden, here we are. Now, some of this overlaps with the Newfoundland Slope Marine Refuge, which has always been the winners versus losers, industry versus the fishery, which has been an ongoing controversy. And there's some reintroduction parcels here. Do we know or have a base understanding of how many of these parcels have been covered by the seismic program the province used to conduct, to the tune of about $20 million a year?
Yeah, some of it's been covered, certainly, and the Jeanne d'Arc is still being covered by seismic. Exxon has a seismic activity plan for this summer in the area around the Hibernia and Hebron platforms. that to me indicates that they're looking at what we call in the business subsea tiebacks. In other words, within 10, 15 kilometers of an existing platform, they find a smaller reservoir. And that's not big enough to justify a standalone development. But, boy, take Hibernia's southern extension, about 10 kilometers from the Hibernia platform, 200 million barrels. 200 million barrels doesn't justify a new platform or the expense of it. But, boy, 200 million barrels at whatever the price of oil was at the time or is at the time certainly justifies producing. So they tie it back. They drill it, and then they run it by pipe back to the platform itself, because you have surplus capacity on the platform too as your original reservoir gets depleted. So I'm not convinced that life is over in the Jeanne d'Arc Basin. Life is not over for Hibernia, Hebron. Certainly life's not over for White Rose. If you look at the fact that the CGS down there, Gench, is under construction. That's going to be towed out next year and installed, and that's a sort of a tie back to the Sea Rose FPSO. So it's far from dead, people think. All you have to do, Patty. I don't know if you've been down the waterfront here in St. John's yesterday, but I was down there yesterday, and just listen to this. Horizon Dragon, Scandi Vinland, Atlantic Heron, Braga Viking, Virginia Ann, and two Maersk vessels. All these vessels are in the port for some reason. Part of it is to support the upcoming drilling operation by Exxon. Remember, Exxon is drilling out in the Orphan Basin too. Exxon's partner, Caterpillar, the Stena Drill Max is a 6th or 7th generation big drill ship. It's on its way up from Guyana. It's going to be off Bay Bulls, I think, on the 3rd or 4th of May. So there's a lot of vessels sort of lining up to support that. And, of course, we may have 6 or 7 vessels in the harbor. Well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yesterday. Remember, we have probably 5 offshore. So you've got 10 or 11 supply boats working, some platform supply vessels, which means that they have no towing capabilities, and some anchor handlers that tells you they can set anchors. But you get 10, 12 supply vessels, and each supply vessel represents, I don't know, a crew of 12 times 2, 24. So it's fair employment generation in the supply boat industry, and it's nice to see. It means, and of course there's another rig coming for Equinor this summer. So it's far from dead, put it that way.
Yeah, the Stenamax, they're not doing it for fun. That's in the neighborhood of hundreds of $1,000s a day.
Oh, I would say.
Right, I mean, it's crazy money.
I would say $400,000 a day.
Yeah, the last number I was using was $385, so fair enough. And Brent's trading at about $85 this morning. And yes, that activity is something. And you talk about the subsea tiebacks, what have you, which has long been well understood in the industry. But if you talk about Bay du Nord, which is not one hole, it's 8 different fields, and we know there's going to be the likelihood of not a whole lot of work done, say for instance at Bull Arm, topsides and otherwise. That's kind of where Equinor has been kind of saying. But the amount of subsea work is going to be extraordinary if and when they ever give that the green light, because that's going to be massive.
And to complement or support what you're saying, remember there's probably, as the last thing I said, there's probably 60 or 70 wells to be drilled in the Bay du Nord field, because it is 6 or 7 separate fields, and each field might have 5 or 6 wells to be drilled. So if you've got 60, 70 wells to be drilled, remember there's a drill rig out there drilling those wells. There'll probably be several drill rigs out there drilling those wells, and the POB, meaning persons on board, the crew. A crew in a semi-submersible drilling those wells would probably be, 100. So 100 on the rig, 100 ashore for the next 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, and then 3 or 4 supply boats, and then activity at the supply base, and trucking, and crane operators, and catering, and mud companies, and it goes on. So when we say we may not do a lot of fabrication for Bay du Nord, there is still an awful lot of business, a lot of opportunities for us here in Newfoundland, even if we're not fabricating all the topside modules. I'd like to see us do one. I really would. I think I think it would keep the industry alive. It would keep the fabrication component in Newfoundland, the Pennycons and the Cows and the DF Burns and all the different fabricators, because there's not a lot of fabrication coming from the wind industry. which, by the way, I was in Botwood last Thursday night for that presentation, and I listened to you Friday morning, and I listened to a caller call in and say that he couldn't get any information. Well, I got to tell you, if he couldn't get any information out there last Thursday night, there's something wrong with him. They had 6 or 7 of their specialists there, and each one had a little booth set up, and you could go and you could ask all the questions you wanted from the environmental people, from the port people, from the wind farm people, from the business people, from the town people. So if anybody tells you that session in Botwood last Thursday night, you couldn't get any information, that's bull. I was there. I spent 2 hours asking questions. So there you go.
Rob, as usual, appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Patty. Take care. Have a good week.
You too.
Have a good weekend. It's only Wednesday. Okay.
Thanks, Rob.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. And, of course, there will be people, including, I think, some people in the queue who think that any activity offshore is untoward, unnecessary, and problematic. But, of course, we're talking about what's actually happening. And your opinion on it is welcomed if you'd like to share. Let's go to line 1 before we get to the news. Good morning, Jack. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you today, mate?
I'm excellent, thanks. How you doing?
Well, I'm still on this side of the south, and that's as good as I get. So I'm basically bedridden now for the past 3 or 4 years. And I wanted to throw out a bouquet, well, I guess, to all nurses, because I've had some excellent nurses when I was in hospital, especially at St. Clair's. And I want to throw out a bouquet to all of us, but especially to the 3 nurses I got coming, taking care of me from the Department of Health. I forget the right name on it now, but they come in every day, Patty, and I'd like to thank them, and I'd like to mention, there's Melissa and Sasha, and I really appreciate it, what they do for me. And I can't remember the third girl's first name right now, but the 3 that I got are excellent, and they've worked hard, I know that, and for the service I get, I hope everyone else is getting as good or half as good as what I get from my 3 nurses, and I want to publicly thank them and throw them a special bouquet this morning.
Jack, are we talking about nurses coming into your home?
Yeah.
Okay, home care workers, fair enough.
Yeah. And the nurses come in and like from public health, and in Carbondale, they come in, and I've been having them for years now. And here lately, they have come in on a daily basis to help me with some problems I have with. And I mean, I couldn't ask for better, Patty. Your wife or your mother wouldn't do you any better than these are doing. And I just wanted to thank not only the 3 of them, but all nurses, because I've had good service everywhere I went with nurses.
Well, I mean, once you get in the system, by and large, the healthcare professionals, certainly including registered nurses, are top quality healthcare pros, and I'm glad that's your experience, Jack. I'm sure they appreciate your thoughts and your bouquet this morning. Thanks for this.
You're welcome, Patty, and have a good day.
Very same to you. Wish you well, Jack.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Very quickly before the news, so plenty of callers contacting us and saying on parts of the highway right across the island it is really thick fog, and just a friendly reminder to engage your headlights, which engages your tail lights. The daytime runner simply will not illuminate the rear of your vehicle, so just a friendly reminder. Reach over with your left hand, flick on the headlights. Let's take a break. When we come back, Tent City, Moose, whatever you want to talk about, don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 3. Carrie, you're on the air.
Hi, good morning, Patty, and good morning to all your listeners. I just wanted to call in and let folks know about some recent developments that have been happening at Tent City. I showed up yesterday as a volunteer with some laundry, and there were 3, workers in these, white hazmat suits with their faces covered. They had these, masks over their mouth. They had sunglasses on, and they were putting up signs that said, this area, we weren't allowed to have temporary, semi-permanent, or permanent structures, no loitering, and no open fires. They also had a police officer with them and a staff worker. Someone said that they were the assistant deputy minister for the Department of Transportation and Works. This person would not give us their name. And they wouldn't really tell us what the next steps were. They said they just putting up these signs. They don't know what's going to happen after they put up the signs. They did take down some tents that didn't have anyone in them, though they were obviously tents that people lived in. There were blankets and personal belongings there. And we are really, really concerned that this kind of means all of the tents are going to be removed, all of the people are going to be removed. And that this protest is going to be taken down by the police. I think this protest has been really, really important for drawing attention to the housing crisis. I mean, we just had a senior on your show talk about how, you can't live on CPP and OAS. In the city, the cost of rent and everything, we do have seniors at Tent City who can't afford to rent. We have people there with physical disabilities, sickness, mental health issues, addictions issues. And they can't afford to get a house on income support. They're pushed into these shelters that are just absolutely disgusting. CBC did a really good investigation on the shelter system back in the fall. I mean, I've been in some of the shelters. They're not allowed to have visitors. Some of them, they only get fed 1 or 2 meals a day. And of course, your income support is cut off, is way lowered if you're put into a shelter. I mean, if the shelters were so good, people would not be in tents. No one wants to be living out in a tent out in the rain if there are better options. The government, of course, is calling us liars and saying, the shelters are fine. But we've shared pictures, we've shared experiences, and we're really, really concerned about, if the police response to this protest.
That's the unknown. So a couple of questions is, this was always going to happen. That's just my personal opinion, which I've guessed for a little while here now. But then next is, if they're not going to be there, where? Because things didn't automatically or magically change overnight. So they're just going to be shuffling people around to different parts of the province. So whether it be all of a sudden we see these tents in Bowring Park, or who knows where, or maybe across the street from Confederation Building again. My worry is twofold. It's, number one, the confusion about what's being offered. If it's simply emergency shelters, we've been down that road. But the government, as recently as yesterday, said transitional homes, which I assume means the Comfort Inn. Whether or not that's been offered, I have no earthly idea. Whether it be other hotels, they used those two words yesterday. I don't know if that's accurate or not. And then secondly, I don't know when the time is going to come where they remove tents that even have people living in them, and then maybe remove people themselves, and whether that's forcibly or whatnot. Because if it's just sort of, here's the sign and people abide by it, I'm pretty sure not everyone is going to abide by it. And so consequently, we're going to have some sort of altercation that is going to be problematic for everybody, including the government and the police and the people living in the tents. And I think society at large, because we've seen police interaction, whether it be fisheries protests like a Federation Building, and right around the country when we see the protests, whether it be pro-Palestine, pro-Israel, whatever the case may be, we've arrived at a really precarious time here in the country. And so things like this are unfortunately and likely inevitably going to end up in terrible situations. And people are applauding this move made by Minister Abbott or Minister Hutton, but the fact is, it's just shuffling people around. This hasn't solved anything.
Absolutely. I mean, John Abbott said in December that people were going to have houses before Christmas, and we haven't seen any moves on that. I can confirm that, no one at Tent City has been offered the Comfort Inn. It's not ready. I know, one resident was offered a hotel room. They put him in a cab and sent him to one of, the worst shelters in the city. There were, blankets between the beds. And he wasn't even given a mattress. He was put on a box spring. And people are going to say that's unbelievable. That can't be true. And I wish it wasn't, I wish that the shelters were better regulated and actually provided people an ounce of dignity. And if they did, we wouldn't see Tent City. But the shelter system is absolutely deplorable. And people don't want to be living in tents. Like, they want housing. And this has been a crisis that's been going on for years. And really, I think Tent City has put pressure on government like we haven't seen before. And I think government did respond in a lot of ways. Like, I am seeing, like, a lot of nonprofits are hiring housing support workers, and there's all these commitments to, like, building housing, and they're getting rid of red tape so more private people can probably not rent to these people. But I think that, just getting rid of the tents, exactly. We're just going to build them up again. Like, it's not addressing the root problems. It's just creating tension, police altercations, and I think it's just going to criminalize people who are already kind of, in a really hard spot. And if the best that the government can offer people who are in crisis is a police response, like, what does that say about our government? Like, I think we are a place, I think that, we pride ourselves on taking care of each other. We love the story of, like, Come From Away and how we open our doors to people from Gander. And I think that's really, important and honorable. And, like, I absolutely want to be a kind of place where, like, we are taking care of each other. And I don't see the government really showing empathy for these resident protesters.
Kerry, I appreciate the time and the update this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. If anyone would like to support, if you're in the St. John's area, like, please come down. We'd love to have more boots on the ground. If you're not in St. John's, like, please, if you could organize a protest, show one person with a sign at your MHA's office, I think really pushes the message to government that, like, we aren't going to put up with this, that housing is a human right, that we need to take care of each other, and everyone deserves safe and secure housing.
Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. All right, let's try to stay on time with the breaks. Barry, you're next. Talk about Moose. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4. Barry, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Thanks for taking my call.
No problem. What's on your mind?
Patty, it's that time of year again, Patty, when in the springtime, when the moose are getting ready to have their new calves, and they drive off last year's calves, and presents a big problem around the highways and byways of the province. And I believe that to date now, I think, to my knowledge, there's been 3 moose vehicle collisions because of this action. I'd just like to make drivers aware that it's a dangerous time to be on the roads in nighttime, foggy conditions. And, another thing, too, Patty, is that where we're not used to seeing that many moose anymore on the highways, we don't seem to be paying as much attention to moose on the highways.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you add in the conditions today and it becomes especially tricky. I mean, it's hard enough to see a vehicle in front of you. Like just this morning on the Outer Ring Road, at the Allendale on-ramp, or the off-ramp, I'm coming around the corner and there's a car coming out in front of me, and fair enough, there was nothing dangerous, but it was a small little black sedan with no taillights engaged. I could have been on top of that thing in a heartbeat. And same thing could be said for a moose, which of course is not going to be just coming down the on-ramp or the off-ramp. They're going to be coming up over the shoulder. So I think there's always a need for us to be aware this time of year, these types of weather conditions, maybe especially so.
Yes, indeed. Well said, Patty. Patty, I'd like to talk about sharing the harvest next. I just recently made a donation. I bought 10 braces of rabbits locally snared here, and they were clean. I donated those to the food bank. And I just recently, past couple of weeks, I bought and donated approximately 40 seal flippers to food banks and senior citizens. Patty, I'd just like to make a shout-out to the hunters, food gatherers, anglers of the province that it's getting that time of the year now where it's getting close to being summertime, and take a look in your deep freezer and just see if you have anything that you're not going to eat, and probably will go in the garbage. And I don't mean to say that in a derogatory way, Patty. Just to, it's a shameful waste of our wildlife resources that we hear stories about all this game food going in the garbage each year. So now is the time to be able to donate it, and the food banks would gladly take it, and as well as the food bank recipients would love to have it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, some of these are really helpful programs, and, we know the needs at the food banks are extraordinary. Their donations are down, whether it be of goods and or dollars, so every little bit helps, and some of that country food is real comfort food for folks.
Absolutely, Patty, and to hear some of the comments from the food banks when they drop this country food off to the food bank recipients is it's heart-wrenching. It really is.
Of course it is. I mean, the stories I hear about the amount of need in the community it's overwhelming sometimes. Barry, anything else before I take another call?
Yes, two quick topics, Paddy, and that both have to do with DFO. One is, of course, the food fishery. Still no announcement, Paddy. And I know I was on last time talking about getting the 3 weeks back in the summertime, but I just recently came across my table that the Maritimes have a new season now, and I can't remember exactly, but I believe it goes for about 2 months long. And I think that DFO should align the Newfoundland Labrador food fishery with that to make things fair. And as well, Patty, in closing, I still haven't heard anything about the fishery or river guardians. Again, they're there to the show, the outdoor show there the weekend past. And this guy comes up. He says, "I know who you are, Barry Ford. I'm a river guardian. I just like," and he shook my hand, like say thanks for what you're doing. And just like that, he was gone again.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this in the past, and, it's not a program that's run by the federal government. It's actually a separate private contract. And last year, they extended it somewhat, but not enough. We got too few guardians trying to cover too many rivers and not covering the entirety of the season. So we're opening up, field day for the poachers. Last year was about $20 million, if I remember correctly, for that contract. So we'll see where it goes, both on the recreational food fishery, and you got to believe, unless there's some sort of magic attached to the petition table by Clifford Small in the House of Commons, that it's going to be 39 days with pretty much the exact same season as last year. They probably already have made up their mind about what it's going to be, but for some reason are going to wait till the 11th hour to tell us. I just can never understand the hesitancy. If they have a decision made, just tell us. Let the chips fall where they may. People are going to react the same way today as they would when the announcement is made much closer to the season. And again, last year, the year before, almost identical dates. Just trying to match up the weekends. Of course, the calendar flips, but almost the identical dates and the same number of days. So anyway, Barry, I appreciate the time. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you, Patty. It's always been a pleasure.
My pleasure, sir. All the best. All right, bye-bye. There we go. Let's keep rolling here. Line 5. Dave, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Good morning to you.
You got a lively show on the go this morning.
Yep, not bad.
Always. Kind of the reason I called in, first thing this morning, as usual, I'm an early riser, so I'm up looking at VOCM's news stories of the day, listening to things on social media. One of the things that is becoming blatantly obvious is the amount of politics that's being played around the existence of Tent City in St. John's, which, to me, we don't have that here that I've seen on the West Coast, but it does appear to be and has been an issue in St. John's for quite some time. I was in there months ago when they were set up across from the Confederation building. Basically, all that happened, I guess, was they were made to move. Some chose housing options, and I guess others chose to stay, which in itself, you'd have to question exactly how rational a decision that is. If any, I've heard a comment this morning on one of your previous callers that housing was a right. Well, I think shelter is a right, certainly. But when somebody offers you shelter, is the ability then to go through a variety of demands and wishes pertinent in the middle of a housing crisis? Because we all know that we have both going on. We have homeless and we have housing issues for a variety of reasons, everything from immigration to cost of living, causing people to have to move out, and different issues that see people at the end of the day finding themselves homeless. But I still do not get why Jim Dinn and others are trying to make this seem, heavens knows that I got no problem complaining about our government when I feel that it's time to complain about something. But I also will stand up and defend our premier and anybody else who, in this issue, I think is kind of being demonized by the opposition from both parties, from the NDP and I think probably Conserves, that these issues are simply governmental. They're not. I mean, they're systemic of a broken society that reaches everywhere from why are these shelters that are being reported as being substandard, very deplorable conditions, dangerous? First of all, deal with that. I mean, if you've got a shelter that's being operated like that, that's dangerous and almost, not a good choice. If people are choosing to live in tents because of the shelters, that problem can be fixed. What you do, very simply, is shut down that shelter. And if it's got a repetitive history of being a poorly operated place that's subhumane conditions or whatever you want to think, well, deal with that. As far as the violence is concerned, we have a police force that can go to these shelters, remove people that are violent. If they're repeat offenders and they're constantly an issue of safety in those shelters, maybe the proper spot for them is in a mental facility, not left to their own devices and to the worry of other people that have to avail of what I see as a basic right, and for sure as being shelter. And if these shelters are not safe, shouldn't that indicate to not only government but the opposition and others that maybe, okay, instead of playing politics about this and hauling up the old soapbox and preaching politics, why don't we get together and actually come up with a solve? Because just like healthcare, which I think should be depoliticized and left out of the ability for healthcare issues to be used to get an applaud or a pat on the back, should never be that. But it seems to me, without going any further into or deeper into this topic, that some of these choices to stay in a tent in February in St. John's, Newfoundland, I mean, that is not the most rational choice. I mean, if somebody offered me heat and shelter, I wouldn't care if it was in a broom closet or where they kept a hot water heater. I'd get indoors.
But Dave, that sounds like someone who hasn't experienced the conditions at a mercy shelter. I mean, I saw one time, and look, I'm telling you, if someone's trying to kick their drug habits surrounded by drug users, if someone has been sexually assaulted or physically assaulted, and the conditions that present themselves in some of those shelters, that's the question. That's the concern. And
yes.
Look, I mean, talk about rational decision making. We're also talking about individuals that might have some very complex needs, right? Whether it be with, and not everybody, but whether it be with mental illness and or severe addictions and or who knows what their lot in life is. The fact of the matter is, even if people don't care, if you don't care about who these people are, they don't want help, or they've made their own bed, all that stuff, the fact of the matter is, as the general tax-paying public, I spoke to this yesterday or the day before, whatever it was, and it's a report that examined over 93,000 admissions to the Academic Teaching Hospital in Toronto, looking at the costs associated with those who are housed versus those who are not housed. We're talking about mental, physical, and other admissions. The fact of the matter is, regardless if you care or not, the cost and the length of stay for the homeless is double what it is for those who are housed. Why? Because of their complex needs. So consequently, if we don't deal with it, all we're doing is shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic. We're moving people around to different parts of the province to set up a camp or set up a tent. It comes with an implication in healthcare. It comes with potential implications for criminal justice. So it's in our best interest to do the best we can on this front. There is all kinds of work out there that's been done that shows clearly the cost to have people housed is less than the cost associated with social services, mental health services, physical health services, addictions, and prisons. It is less costly to house them than it is to leave them unhoused. So you can't flip a switch and improve the conditions in mercy shelters today. And working towards this has been time-consuming, arduous, unnecessary task because we haven't had a strict set of regulations for conditions, monitoring, oversight, and enforcement. And until that's done, nothing's going to change. So even this decision by government, being applauded in many corners, we're just shuffling people around. Nothing has improved. Nothing has changed. And if you're talking about the amount of money it costs us more. Every piece of documented evidence out there is clear. It costs us more to leave them unhoused than to house them. And you can call them lazy or addled or whatever people want to label them with. If we're just looking at dollars and cents, not morality, not societal ills or issues, dollars and cents, it's costing us more money to go down the path we're on. To me, that makes no sense. I mean, and I hate putting money in front of actual comfort and societal responsibility, but those are the facts of the matter. We're spending more money unnecessarily so. So that's it. Dave, final thoughts to you before I get to the break.
Well, I got to agree with everything that you just said. And the problem is not just simply housing. And I think if they went in, they looked at these shelters, how they're being operated, there should be some standard that should be acceptable to just about anybody versus living in a tent. If they reach those type of levels, or let's say that they're currently operating, and it is the better decision to live in a tent, then I'm going to tell you, we got bigger problems in society than just simply housing, because that should never be. Obviously, if you or I were operating a restaurant or whatever, we'd be subject to inspection, operating at acceptable levels and whatever. If that's not going on with these shelters, then there is where the basic crux of this problem lies, and that's got to be dealt with. The people that are in these tents, whether it be for psychological reasons, addictions, dependency, whatever the case may be, they deserve help too. And if the alternative to living in a tent being shelters, and that's worse, there's the issue. That's what we got to attack.
I appreciate the time, Dave. Thank you.
Thanks, Patty.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
All right, let's take a break. We're going to continue with housing, this time out in Gander. There's a reason why it feels different in the city of St. John's. Why? Because a lot of the supports for people who need them are here. And so consequently, people are coming to the city for those types of supports. But that's not to say there's not homeless concerns in many other towns, communities around the province, including Gander. The Mayor of Gander is Percy Farwell. He's up right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 6. Say good morning to the Mayor of Gander. That's Percy Farwell. Mayor Farwell, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, sir.
Take us back to September of 2022 and the decision to purchase this 15,000 square foot church.
Well, I guess, to go back to some of the discussion you've had with your previous callers, we do certainly have a housing challenge here in Gander. I would suggest it is a housing crisis. It's not as conspicuous, as visible as it is in some other places, but we have challenges in every aspect. And as you correctly pointed out, the support services are not in a place like, not here specifically in Gander. We don't have an emergency shelter. What we have is homeless people being shuffled around to various neighborhoods, to various NLHC properties, and creating issues wherever they go because the supports aren't around them when they go there, and these sorts of things. We do have a dearth of transitional housing. We don't have enough affordable housing. We have not enough housing stock at all bands of the spectrum. So the issue is very real and here. And although as a municipality under the Municipalities Act we don't have the mandate to engage in housing issues, unlike the City of St. John's does under their legislation, we do understand that municipality has a key role to play in being a facilitator and being a partner and trying to find solutions to these issues in our community. We are ultimately responsible for the well-being of all the people in our community, and that includes those that don't have adequate shelter over their heads. So a year and a half or so ago, an opportunity presented itself when a large property became available on the market in an area of town that we felt was ideal to house solutions to some of the social needs we have here. So in the absence of somebody stepping forward immediately to take advantage of that, the town deliberated on a considerable bid and ultimately decided to purchase the former Pentecostal church facility, which is, as you said, a 15,000 square foot facility right in the center of town in an area near services. So we did that, and for the sole purpose of going out and inviting expressions of interest for proposals to meet social needs in the community, whether they be health or housing, or we didn't narrow it too much, but ultimately the successful proponent was our local Housing and Homelessness Community Advisory Board, who are a dream team in terms of the stakeholders that are on that board that are taking responsibility for housing and homelessness. So we have since then we have accepted their proposal as being the model that we think would be the best use of that property, and to ultimately that property needs to transition to that board and that board needs the support from the provincial government in order to do necessary renovations and to do some of the operational things that are funded by government in many other places around the province and in multiple locations in St. John's, for example, where they're obviously based on the scale, you need multiple locations. So that's where we've been since a year and a half ago. We took possession of this building. The model, the stakeholder group that is prepared to run that facility, and the idea of the model is that it would be sort of a combination. Emergency shelter, transitional housing, possibly some element of affordable housing built into it. There is some affordable housing right next door to it already. There would be, that would be, and of course, most importantly, the wraparound supports that are needed for the people that are having to find themselves in situations where they have to avail of these services. So it's the kind of model that I think most places would want, and they're difficult to get. Typically, government is up against wanting to do something in a place, and the community is opposed to it in a particular area, and the town council, as a result, ends up rejecting the proposal and everything else. We've got the opposite here. We've got the community engaged. We've got the town council advocating to do this. We know there's going to be some objections. There will be, and we're prepared to deal with those as they come. But we're trying to be proactive in averting a tent city and this sort of thing. And we've had, in the time since we've purchased this property, there's been 3 successive ministers responsible for housing, each of which I've toured the facility with, each of which thinks it's a great idea. The CEO of Newfoundland and Labrador Housing has been through it with us. Awesome idea. Everybody's on board, and certainly conceptually, but the wheels turn so slowly, and we're still in a situation where a year and a half later we're paying the light bill, we're holding on to a building, and we've got an increasingly frustrated community advisory board that is prepared and has the energy there, or had the energy there to run this thing, and they just keep feeling like they're spinning their wheels, and we're not saying that government is not interested and they don't recognize it as a solution. It's just that the mechanisms of government don't seem to be able to respond unless there's a crisis, unless there's a huge bonfire that has to be put out, and then things happen very quickly. And
right.
It's unfortunate and it's frustrating for us.
We're not even quite sure what constitutes the formal definition of a crisis. It's a moving target when we talk about the urban setting versus in your community. So, it's one thing to have the philosophical excitement, encouragement, and platitudes, quite another to get some action happening here. So when we talk about the amount of money you need, prior to that, so when the town was considering purchasing this old church for about $500,000, was there at that point already ongoing conversation with the province to say that, look, we're thinking about doing this. Are you going to be on side with some financial support? Did that happen concurrently?
Not so much directly between the municipality. I think our community advisory board was having those discussions around solutions that they were coming forward with, and the type and level of support that might be available from the province. I can't really speak for them, but I think those discussions were happening. We recognized the need. We knew that this board was seeking a home, and we knew that was one of a few different potential uses of that building, and we didn't really want it's a very good facility for the price it was going for, so we didn't want it to become another, storage building, or a need that might be beneficial to the community in some respects, but not as essential to the community as some of the gaps that are here now that this facility in this location would need. So yeah, I can't really speak to the. Yeah.
So the municipalities don't formally have a mandate to provide housing, and the province absolutely does. And I think you made a couple of really interesting points. The government was quick enough to come up with a solution and $21 million over a 3-year lease for the Comfort Inn. And then you talk about the core funding that could indeed be matched to the tune of $187,000 a year, like they do in Exploits, like they do in Marystown, like they do at several sites here in the city of St. John's. But in reaction to the housing minister saying that there hasn't been a formal architectural engineer go through, talk about the structural stability of the building, what's actually needed, whether or not the proposed refurbishments can actually happen, and until that happens there will be no action. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say, is government, what is their role? Are they just waiting for an invitation to the ribbon cutting? We don't have the mandate. We have the idea. We have the good team in place that's interested in implementing the idea. Yes, it needs detailed architectural drawings and so on. And in fairness, back when we first introduced this idea, I think it was under Minister Abbott, there was, I think, NLHC at that time engaged an architect to do some sort of low-level sort of architectural renderings drawings or development of what the facility might look like. But the details, they've never gotten to the point of detailing, because what came back, to my understanding, and was not what the board was looking for, was the whole entire facility would simply be an emergency shelter, and that is not what the concept was. The concept was we need the wraparound services, we need the transitional housing, we need all those supports. This facility can accommodate all of it, but it seems like the interest at the time was the current crisis is we have a bunch of people being kicked out of the Albatross. We need somebody to go in somewhere other than the Albatross, so the Albatross Hotel. So this is the solution. So that's our crisis of the moment. So we want this to be an emergency shelter, and we're not really dealing with anything else at this point. And we want the longer term, broader based solution to the various components of that issue. So who are is the municipality supposed to engage architects to go and finalize the design and present construction ready drawings to government before, or to the board before they can get funding from the government to do it? I mean, at what point does the province take some leadership in this, as opposed to waiting for drawings, and I don't want to mislead, because like I say, they did have an architect engaged initially. The first thing they said was there was fire safety issues in the building that would require significant modification, or they weren't sure what they were. So we intervened and sort of egged the fire commissioner's office on to make sure that was communicated clearly back to government's architect, that they could deal with that, because this building has never been used for overnight accommodations, for example, and then that's sort of requires a different standard of fire safety and that kind of stuff. So we've been pushing along those things as we go. And recently, I think there's been some funding made available from the province to the advisory board to engage an individual to help quarterback the project. But we're 18 months in, we'll soon be 2 years in, and once we get a plan, once we get drawings and an agreement on exactly what supports are going to go in there, you're probably looking at another 18 months easily before the doors open and someone can show up for a ribbon cutting. So we just need people that are like us and like the advisory board, that are on this and have this as a priority to get this project moving, get it done and move on. There's issues everywhere. We are much closer to a solution here than you are in many areas. So let's just get it done, and that's the frustrating part for us.
Hear, hear. Appreciate the time this morning, Mayor Farwell.
My pleasure, Paddy.
Take care. Bye-bye. As Percy Farwell, here's the mayor of the town of Gander. The idea is there. The solution is available. And I know it's not switch-flipping opportunities, but anyway, if you want to comment on that, you know what to do. So we brought up the story earlier this morning about an LPN who felt forced out of the public system to become a travel nurse. The scope of practice conversation across the healthcare professional gamut has been, if we maximise what they're trained and accredited to do, it can make the system less cumbersome for the individuals, for the potential patients. That's happened over the course of 6 years for licensed practical nurses. Has their pay changed? No. How do they get paid in comparison to registered nurses who they have very similar duties, albeit different levels of schooling, what have you? NAPE President Jerry Earle, who represents many of these LPNs, right after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the president at NAPE. That's Jerry Earle. Jerry, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you?
Best kind this morning. How about you?
Not doing too bad.
Just a couple of quick update questions. Before we get into the LPN world, any additional information coming to bear regarding the plan to twin the highways and privatize it?
We have heard nothing positive or negative in the last month or so since we had a meeting with officials of government. We clearly articulated our position, but we've heard nothing to come back in the last 30 days, whether it be positive or negative, but they clearly know our position, and I certainly hope they are not planning on continuing as they were.
Yeah, because it's one thing to come up with the idea, and of course it's going to mean more work because there's more blacktop. We don't know if there's going to be changes to equipment. We don't know what national standards means. We don't exactly know who's going to do the work and all that kind of stuff. So still a lot yet to be understood. Okay, let's get into the... Pardon me? Go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, in that whole area in work service transportation, there seems to be an agenda around this public-private partnership that we don't have clear answers for, but that's one particular department for some reason, as this agenda, and I think it's bureaucrats in that department, sometimes even disconnected from politicians. I'm not sure why they're taking this path, but it makes no sense on information that we're aware and the public is certainly aware of.
Yeah, I mean, one of the statements made alongside this announcement was, well, built or based on the successes of other P3s. A little bit out in front of the success claim because, I mean, for starters, the long-term care facilities in Central just opened and they were delayed for months and hundreds of deficiencies. Same thing with the Corner Brook Hospital. Same thing with the potential to replace St. Clair's. Same thing with the new penitentiary. We can't call anything a success until we can measure what constitutes success, so it's sort of a strange way to couch it. Anyway, it seems to me the P3 is now the selected path forward, when years ago it was controversial every time it was even breathed, let alone formally announced. So it's remarkable how things have changed. All right, let's get into the LPNs. So we know there was lots of tension given the Globe and Mail article, $36.5 million over a few months for travel nurses. Then one LPN in particular said she felt pressured out of the system, wasn't respected, wasn't properly paid. Now a travel nurse, more flexibility, more money, and all the rest that goes with it. So when across the gamut of healthcare pros, we're talking, let's expand your scope of practice. Because if you're trained and accredited to do X, let's let you do it. That happened for LPNs in some form or fashion over the course of 6 years, but their pay hasn't changed. Give us the update.
Yeah, first let me preface my comments that the individuals that do this work, such as this licensed practical nurse, none of this is focused on those individuals. You can certainly respect their decisions, try to do better for themselves, but often they don't realize till after I've actually done some things that are detrimental, because you get paid more in the moment, but then you realize, do I really want to make a career? So what's happened, Patty, and what's been happening for some time, and we're hoping that's going to be one of the things that we resolve by the Newfoundland Labrador Health Service, the new board. We had previously had 4 regional health authorities. Previous to that, we had some 14. The inconsistencies in practices was unbelievable, and I'll focus in on practical nurses, or the ones we represent. We had cases where a practical nurse could do their full scope of practice in St. John's, but you go to Central Newfoundland, they couldn't. We had cases, Patty, in a single institution where on 4 West they could, they go on 3 East they couldn't. So there's been a number of inconsistencies. Practical nurses are a critical component of healthcare. They bring value to our system, and this practical nurse, what she's saying is feeling undervalued. That echoes what most believe in the healthcare system. A number that has been addressed now, and again, I don't mind giving credit where credit is due. In the last year or so, I've always said, and you heard me say, listen to frontline workers. Well, frontline practical nurses themselves met with the minister and officials, have recently met with executive team, with Newfoundland Labrador Health Services, and things are being done to address that. It should have been done long before now, because we have practical nurses now. One time practical nurses were in restricted areas. We have them in community health now. We have them in public health. We have them specialized areas in acute care. They are a key factor in our long-term care, along with personal care attendants. Most don't realize in our long-term care facilities, practical nurses and personal care attendants make up over 80% of the staff complement that do hands-on care. So that's been an issue, and if you talk to most practical nurses, the employers, which was ironically healthcare employers, were not valuing what they brought to the table, what they brought to the bedside, and what they brought to our communities across Newfoundland and Labrador. Long overdue what's happening for practical nurses now, but we still have work to do.
There's different schooling requirements and what have you between LPNs and RNs.
Absolutely.
But the fact of the matter is they're earning less than half the salary of a registered nurse, and they don't exactly have half the scope of practice. So, when we expand their job requirements or job descriptions, you would assume that most people working in whatever capacity would want to get paid more to do more. It's human nature. It would be my mindset and thought process if it happened to me, but anyway, I do want to get another one in before we run out of time. Unless you have another comment on that one.
No, and that was a big piece, Patty. Like, even the legislation changed, education requirements changed, the scope of practice changed, and like I said, we had a working group that actually put together an incredible document, presented it to the minister, and there is now a process. It's just, again, unfortunately, these processes, I wish they could be dealt with in a timely manner. We've been waiting now some 9 months to get the process started. There's been some initial things put in place, but we need the process done, completed, and reviewed reviewed so that practical nurses in Newfoundland and Labrador are finally recognized for their scope of practice, their education requirements, and the value they bring to the healthcare team.
Last one. So here comes the integrated ambulance system, maybe as early as a month from today, and we still don't know a bunch of things. So can you help us understand, do we know whether or not seniority is going to be recognized? And number two, who's going to represent these individuals? Because people will talk about the further privatization of the healthcare system, but seniority and who's going to represent them, do we know?
Let me tell you the biggest hurdle in this. We have had a working group, again, made of frontline workers. We can only speak to the paramedics that we represent, both in public and private. We have been working with Newfoundland and Labrador Health Services and officials, Department of Health working through it. Guess what one of the stumbling block is? We just go right back to a P3 concept. It is the private operators that will not, are actually flatly refusing to share information with Newfoundland and Labrador Health Services that we can determine when somebody actually started to work for them. They are actually sitting down and not sharing information with Newfoundland, the new employer, because we can't guess when somebody was hired. We need somebody to confirm that, and only can these private operators. They are using this as a ransom against the people of Newfoundland and Labrador and these frontline workers. We have paid for these ambulances and their bases and their Band-Aids for 30, 40 years, and these operators are sitting at a negotiating table, and I'll go as far as say holding these frontline workers and Newfoundlanders, Labradorians at ransom because now they want exorbitant compensation for these trucks or the ambulance units and the bases and the Band-Aids, which you, I, and every Newfoundland Labrador have paid for every penny, because these were not true private entities. They were fully publicly funded, and now we're being forced about it. We can't settle away the seniority issue until these private operators shares this basic information, because we have language in our collective agreements that already says when somebody comes in what gets recognized. NAPE is going to do exactly that with the employer, but the employer is saying to our working group made up of paramedics and staff, we need to know when Jerry Earl got hired, the private operator won't tell us. That is unbelievable, unacceptable for a private entity that we have paid millions of dollars into over the last years.
Jerry, appreciate the time as usual. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Paddy.
Great, good man. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
It's Jerry Earl. He's the president at NAPE. Let's take a break for the news. When we come back, Don's there to talk about noise pollution. Don't go away. Oh, I didn't hit the button. I think I know after all these years. Let's take a break.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number one. Don, you're on the air.
Yes, sir. I'd like to bring some awareness to the public about the effects of noise on from outside events, such as outside concerts, and how the council has ignored the fact that this is having a effect upon people who live in the noise shadow of these events. It can create mental problems and physical problems. Now, that's the topic, I guess. Just as background, the World Health Organization has stated that noise pollution is the second worst detriment to the population next to air pollution. And I know that includes airplanes and traffic and a lot of that stuff. But there's also a big component of that is man-made noise that they consider to be from outside concerts and things like that, and living in an urban area.
Yeah, I think they also refer to the noise pollution needing to be persistent and repetitive for it to be that kind of detriment to your health. They do classify noise pollution beginning at 65 decibels, if I'm not mistaken, and very common things that we all use time to time are well in excess of 65 decibels. Just because I knew you wanted to talk about this, I had a quick look around. Lawnmower, generally speaking, around 94 decibels. Hand drill, 98. Motorcycles, 105. Car horn, 110. So it happens a lot. But the issue, like, for instance, with the concert, is I did have a little quick look, and they talk about it being persistent as opposed to one-offs.
Right. But now this event that I'm talking about is 10 days long. Okay? It starts 10 o'clock in the morning with sound checks. It goes all day long. till 11 o'clock at night the concert finishes. It has low frequency impulse noise, which is many studies have indicated that people who suffer from anxiety and depression, this has a major effect upon their health. Okay, it can cause anxiousness, anxiety. It can cause anger. It can cause lack of concentration. It also can have a lot of physical effects. It can increase people's heart rate. It could increase their hypertension, which in effect increases heart enzymes that can cause cardiovascular problems. Okay? So the council has not tried to do any kind of mitigation of sound. Like, this event is right on the doorstep of the high-density living area of mostly seniors within Pleasantville. Okay, they set up down there. The first rule of sound mitigation is site planning. Turn the stage and the speakers back on to the main sensitive area. They could be pounding noise out over the lake, but instead they turn the stage and the noise back right into the people, and without any consideration of what it's doing to the people in the neighborhood. I know that there's people in this area have had to leave their homes, leave and go out in their cars for respite just to get away from it. Okay? And, one old lady told me that she said, I had to remove my hearing aids, bar up all my windows and doors, and just wait till it's over. It's not a one-off event for a day like they're having in some places. This is 10 days every year, which our houses become, to me, unusable. It also has an effect, like, for instance, I suffer from tinnitus. And for those who don't know what that is, and your listeners, that's an aggravating tone that's in your ear that goes, you can hear it at all times. And this gets aggravated as well by noise, right?
And notably, musicians are prone to suffer from tinnitus.
That's right. Now, I have measured, the city council has no concept of how to measure the city staff, because I talked to them, very fine people, but they're just not trained in measuring noise or understanding how noise should be measured. The people that are running the event are saying, our noise is good because they're measuring it on a dBA scale, okay, which cuts off the low frequencies, where it's fully recognized that high levels of modern music has to be measured on a dBC scale. The Academy of Sound Engineers recognizes that. The World Health Organization recognizes that. Everybody recognizes it, but they don't. On my patio last year, I measured 117 dB of bass and drums pounding noise coming into my home from just out on the patio of my apartment. That, if anybody who understands the technical part of that, every 3 dB is a double in noise. The normal accepted standard is 100 dB. So that's 5 times the level that should be hitting my home. This noise could be heard 2 kilometers. And I got a friend of mine who lives 2 kilometers away in his house, and that's too loud. Without taking any kind of mitigation policy, try to turn the stage back on, put up what's commercially available sound barriers between the residents and the tent. All they have up is a tent with a tarpaulin down the sides to block the sound.
And when you talked about low intensity frequency, that's not a decibel measure, that's a hertz measure.
No, the low frequency, the decibel measure, sound is measured in dBc or dBA. A filters off the low frequencies. C gives you a flatter response, so you measure all of the frequencies between 60 or 70 hertz up. With dBA, it cuts off the frequencies below 400 or 500 hertz that contains most of the bass and the drum. That's in hertz, yes. But the actual scale, on the dB scale of a sound meter, that's how it's measured.
Yeah.
I've spent 30-odd years in the electronics industry. I was an associate engineer with Bell, and I taught courses on broadcast services and other things, so I've got some knowledge in the area.
Well, I'm not doubting your knowledge. It sounds like you're quite knowledgeable on that front. I was just making the point that, in addition to decibel measurements, there's the issue regarding low-intensity frequency, and frequency is generally measured in hertz.
That's where the problem is. The low frequency, the pounding, that constant pounding, bang, 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 infiltrating your house. And I think that the residents here have a right to have peace and quiet in their homes. If it was a one-day event or a two-day event like they're having in Churchill Square, you could sort of plan around it. But you got to spend 10 whole days of this. A gentleman up the street told me he could feel the vibration in his door from the base, right?
I can hear it in my home. I live a little further up Logie Bay Road, and I can hear it in the backyard. Don, I appreciate the time, and of course the city will say, as a measure of their permit, then, inside the allowable hours of noise, and of course we all know, I think the cutoff is 11 for when it has to go back to, or I think it's 11, has to go back to what they call a moderate level of noise. But I've been to the tent, and I know how loud it is, and I know how loud it is in the surrounding area. We actually stayed in an Airbnb in Pleasantville during one of the Iceberg Alley events a few years ago when we were doing some renovations, and it was loud. I can acknowledge that point, sir. No issues there. Anything else you'd like to say?
The other thing is that they should remember that it's not necessarily the fact that this is being done for a social event, which I understand. There's all kinds of vacant area that this could be sent to. Like, I don't know what the reason is that it has to be right on the doorstep of a highly residential area when there's so much vacant land around. That's kind of a funny issue, right? But the council will not respond to anything that I have given them. My councillor over Ravencroft has never returned a call. I'm in a constituent. This is her ward. She has never returned my call or my emails. I've sent dozens. There has been some councillors who have responded, and council will say, "Oh yeah, we got your email, we got your information, thanks very much," but nobody has called back and said, "No, we don't agree with you, sorry, we're just going to let this go." And what they're doing is they're issuing a license for them to not abide by the laws that you and I have to abide by. Basically, when they get a special event license, it means that they don't have to follow the rules. And I thank you very much, by the way, for taking the time to pass this out to the public.
I appreciate your time, Don. Thank you.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye. And I mean, right around the corner now is the annual conversation regarding noise pollution and aftermarket pipes. Here it comes. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Wade, you're on the air.
How you doing today, Patty boy?
Not bad. How about you?
Not too bad, but I'm wondering, where's our government, bud? Where's the Newfoundland government at? Can never get a hold of nobody. I've been trying to get a hold of different ministers for months now, and you can't get a hold of nobody. The last thing was today. I've been waiting for medical appointments for over a year, and unfortunately I had to go on income support. So I've been in contact with the lady on and off for the last few weeks in regards to mortgage and confirmation and stuff like that. Last email I sent her was April the 9th, and today, no check. I called to inquire why, and they didn't send out my check because there was a question that they needed to ask me whether my mortgage was a mortgage or a line of credit. Now, I'm going to bounce my mortgage payment today. I'm going to go in default on things that they know they have proof that I have to pay. My son and wife was in the ER all last night with son burning up with a fever of 39. I got medication that they wouldn't even cover today because they kind of canceled me. And again, we called the minister, and they were going to look into it and call us back. They haven't bothered calling us back. So I'm wondering, where is our government, sir?
Well, I don't know. Look, it's been generally difficult to get to speak to a human being when you call various government departments. Counter service has kind of gone by the wayside as well. So I can't answer the question where the government is. I don't know. But so is the issue of holding back your income support check, because I think they go out on the 1st and the 16th of the month. So is it because of that simple request understanding? I think you talked about a mortgage. Can you tell me what that question was?
Yes, well, since the year was up, they wanted another copy, a second copy of my mortgage statement and, yearly whatever that comes from the bank. So when I received that from the bank, I sent it to them directly. Never even took it out of the envelope. Put it in another envelope, send it directly to them. So then a little while later, they wanted a couple more questions, whether or not to know if I paid my property tax or if it was included in the mortgage. And I said, no, I pay it personally to the town every year. And then the last I heard, she was going to check to see if she could help me with that. And then today I didn't get no check. And I mean, I got kids to support, Patty. I got people to feed. I got bills to pay. And I called her and she told me the reason why my check was held up was a distinction whether or not it's a mortgage or a line of credit. So that's why they took the money out of our fridge today. Like I had to go get a loan to get my son the medication. This is embarrassing as hell for me right now. There's people listening to this that, I care not to know what's going on in my life. But how many more people have the government done this to? And I asked them, I said, where's the heart? Where's the compassion? You know what I have. You know the people here. Well, I couldn't get a hold of you. And then she giggled. So I said to her, do you want me to say your name out over the radio? I don't care. Like, that's the whole attitude of the government today, Patty. I'm here now shaking.
So how quick can the turnaround be now that you've supplied the information requested? How quick can the turnaround be so the check is out?
Well, I've submitted the information they've requested twice already, and today was the third time, and she told me she would have to go speak to her manager. And I requested to speak to a manager, and I got hung up on. I'm so upset here. Like, I don't know what to do, Patty. I don't know where to turn. I've been calling the people that's there supposed to be helping me with, the different issues that I'm facing, and I can't get a phone call back, sir. Health Community Services, Western Health, Minister of Health, everybody known to man that I can get to work on it. I'm doing the stuff that I'm supposed to do. I'm not threatening nobody. I'm not, I'm jumping through the hoops that every agency is asking me to jump through in multiple, triplicate, a lot of the times. And this is the kind of stuff we're ending up in. The situation that the society is in today is just trying to pay for everything. And then how many more people are losing houses and stuff because of this, Patty? Like, they caused me to default on my mortgage payment today. Unless I get the money, well, I won't default because I got family that I can depend on. But, like, realistically, I could lose everything as a result of answering one question. And this, they rely on, I think, that the people won't get on here and embarrass themselves by getting the facts out and letting people know that this government got to go. There's nobody around to answer for anything. They do what they want, and the consequences for the small person is astronomical, and they just giggle it off like, oh, it's policy, it's my job.
I'm sorry to hear your troubles, and hopefully the turnaround can be expedited. And, there should be some latitude at the bank on timeliness of mortgage payments when this sort of circumstance pops up. You're their customer and their client. They're making money off you. So hopefully that doesn't go sideways. And I appreciate the time. Would you like to say anything else quick before I have to go?
Well, you know yourself, Patty. I mean, the bank and the financial institutions are only going to be so tolerable. This happens more than once. This is not the first time this has happened. This is the straw that broke the camel's back. Like I say, this is embarrassing for a person to come on here and talk about this kind of stuff. Like, so where is our government? People, call in, talk to Patty, let them know how satisfied you are with our government, and if you can contact them. Elections coming up soon. Don't forget this.
I appreciate the call, Wade. Hopefully you get the cash ASAP.
Well, it's going to be a week plus, Patty. I'd say I won't receive anything till the 16th because then it goes back through the pay cycle and they got to submit it to be paid and blah, blah, blah. You know, one government can't talk to the next branch.
There is a bit of left-hand, right-hand miscommunication, no doubt about that. Off I go, Wade. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for letting me rant, Patty, and hopefully somebody that actually cares heard it.
Yeah, I hope so, too. Take care.
Take care, bud.
All right, bye-bye. Let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 3. Good morning, Susan Guiney. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. It's been so long since I talked to you.
Welcome back to the show.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, I think. I'm hanging in there anyway, coming up to 11:30 on a Wednesday. So the big news today is you and I and Bill have talked many times over the years. The work you do in mental health awareness is really fantastic. And now the next challenge that Bill's got coming up, a 1 million push-up challenge. Unreal.
That's it. That's the big announcement. 1 million push-ups. Now, of course, you got the email, and Bill is out west, Northwest Territories, actually, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. So when he gets home, he's going to be going to 8 different schools, and we're doing presentations, and we're going to talk about this 1 million push-ups and have a little slideshow to show what we've done in the past. And over the next little while, we're hoping to get all the kids to do 10 push-ups with the staff members, and including myself. But I'm hoping that with everything and all of the attention you bring to us, that we can get everybody on board. And, of course, we'll be sharing a link that they can contribute push-ups and tally the push-ups. And if they want to donate on the same link, they can. And get it out all over the airways and, you know, the support for everybody. I mean, mental health is it's in everybody. So we need to get more attention drawn to us. And you're talking about frontline workers. Frontline workers are probably one of the biggest people that have to deal with stress and stressful situations, and we need to start opening up our freedom of speech about this, because it's been pushed under the rug too long, mental health and awareness. You know, we all have a voice, and we all should use our voice, and that's the biggest contribution you can give to this awareness is talking about mental health.
Sure, I'd like to think we're doing better on that front. I could be sadly mistaken, but that's the way I hope things are trending. And inside these awareness campaigns that you and Bill have done, they've been important and they've been very helpful. And we're more than happy to share the news and updates from the various schools and the tally of push-ups and all the rest of it. And next week is actually Mental Health Awareness Week, of which we've got a few things planned as well with the Canadian Mental Health Association. So, yeah, talking about it has been helpful. It's been helpful for me to learn more about it and to, you know, understand that every issue is different. Every family circumstance is different. Access is different when we talk about rural versus urban and all those different concerns that people bring forward. And we're going to keep talking about it. It's in our collective best interest. We've gone from talking about 1 in 5 Canadians with a mental health concern to 1 in 4. I mean, the federal government with more money in this last federal budget. We need to do better provincially, which I think has been acknowledged. What that acknowledgement means and for actual change and improvements remains to be seen. But tell Bill I said hello, and I appreciate you making time for the program. Let me know what I can do during this 1 million push-up challenge.
Yes, and we'll be sending you the link. Yep. And of course, we're also doing the third of with rural counselling and the Gathering Place again this year, and we'll give you more information, and we'll be talking more. And hopefully, I can talk to Linda Swain and maybe have a little sit down with her and get it out there. Is that possible?
Well, now her show has changed, so maybe as a part of the news, 100%, and I'm sure Linda's listening right now, so I will share Bill's email with Linda, and of course, what they do in the newsroom, I have no authority or no saying what goes on there, but I'll send along the information to her, and we'll see what happens.
Yes, and a big hello to my daughter and son-in-law that are listening out in Olds, Alberta. Katie, Al, we love you. And she and Carrie are the reasons we started this out in 2015. So we're going to continue this challenge. So if this is the Million Push-Up Challenge, I wonder what we're going to do on our 10th year. Do you have any ideas?
No, I don't, but I'll ponder it during the newscast, which I have to get through now, Susan. But stay in touch. Send me the link when it's available. Say hello to Bill,
Yes,
and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all your support.
My pleasure, Susan. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Let's take a break for the news. When we come back, mining. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Robin, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. How are you?
Doing okay, thanks. How about you?
I am good. Me, myself, good. I'm calling today, and I'm going to do something that I haven't done before, which is talk about myself personally with you and my experience in the housing crisis as being a witness to. And so as being that, but also being someone who's viewing it through the eyes of privilege. And so it's why I've not spoken about myself in this situation, in this light before, because I have had issues because I feel bad. I feel guilty that I have been awarded so much as I sit back and watch people who have had to fight for everything that they have. So from that lens, I used to, my former job was a professional advocate. I worked with governments. I was invited to the tables with the deputy minister, the boardrooms, the minister back at CSSD when Lisa Dempster was the minister. I had a lot to do with the Department of Education and working directly with them, as well as the departments in the 4 Atlantic provinces. So we would all work together. So I have plenty of experience on that side of the crisis. And I say that side because it's very clear to me that there are 2 sides and a very strong division between. And so to relate it back to the Mayor of Gander, I loved hearing him because he, like myself, has assumed responsibility. He's identified his role, not just as a leader in his community, but as a member of the community. And so, he has done the work. He's had the conversations. He's brought the people together. He's worked towards solutions. And yet he continues to fight a system. And the same thing with the caller just before who was talking about missing his mortgage payment. I have been hearing these stories, and I've been witnessing the downfall of support within my neighborhood, right? So myself and Mark Wilson and a few other residents of Tessier Park started speaking out publicly around 2016. We were meeting with the police, we went through living in community. I mean, we did it all. And we worked hard. And we never got any traction in that time. And so last summer, things were really coming to a head. And so myself and Mark had submitted a proposal to government who had identified a local community group who does a lot of work with government to create a pot of funding, $75,000, to develop a community engagement strategy that would engage the residents to figure out what solutions we could have going forward. And so I actually submitted a detailed proposal to this organization as a way of being the community member. I had some training opportunities available to me from one of the large Canadian foundations for coaching through community engagement, community-led innovation, that sort of thing. So I wanted to pair the two together. And so I submitted that. It sounded great. And then all of a sudden, the rules came in and oversight. And, well, we need to make sure that you're doing this and you're doing that. So what ended up happening was I walked away because I made a decision in 2020 to no longer be a part of boards or organizations or meeting working groups and that sort of thing that sit around a table and never achieve anything. I mean, I've gone to meetings, hours and hours of my free time have been spent in meetings where nothing has come from it. So that organization hired one of their own. And since October, with that $75,000, we have had 2 announcements of a community cleanup, and which were canceled, and a simple survey that went through. And so now that organization is being assigned the duty to bring forward a community center for my neighborhood. And so if I had been able to do the work in the proposal that I set forth, it would have produced a document that would have had a plan based on what the residents need and done by myself, who already has a very good relationship with the residents. Anyway, all that to say, nothing has happened from that. And so now more funding is going to go to an organization to do nothing with. And so I have a very clear understanding of where all the money has gone, and there's been no money throughout the housing crisis and as the poverty issue has been growing. No money has gone to the people themselves. So we have been giving money to organizations to hire people to do work. And down at Tent City, they do not come. Okay? So I am now finding myself in situations where I have to try to navigate a system where I can't trust anyone. So, we had visitors. John Abbott was down to Tent City on Monday, and we spoke to him. Fred Hutton came down on Tuesday morning, and we talked to him. And they were, somewhat decent conversations. Not once did they mention any plans about taking Tent City down. Not once did they indicate that they felt things were unsafe there. And so for the last 6 months, they've been shaming the residents of Tent City for choosing not to go into the only 2 options that have been offered to them for the last 2 years, which is a cot in a room with 40 other people on their cots, and you have to, like a curfew, and then a time you have to get out of bed in the morning. And the private shelters, you get a little bit more stability, but they're all full because the people who are in them don't want to go back to the emergency shelter option. And so when Fred Hutton is standing in front of the cameras and he is saying that they're down there daily, that is a lie. Okay? That is so untrue. And we have not seen any of the income support comes down a couple of 2 or 3 times a week. Now this week they're there every day because they're trying to prove something. But until last week, we might have an income support worker and a housing person from end homelessness show up 2 or 3 times a week. And they don't get to know the residents. They don't take the time to build the relationships that are needed to trust that where you're going to send them is going to be safe for them. And we have a resident who took up the offer of a hotel last week, and he was sent to a halfway house. He gave up his tent, gave all of his supplies away, thinking he was going to go to a room where he'd have privacy, a personal bathroom, a TV, and Wi-Fi. And he was sent to a halfway house where he had to share a room with 2 strangers, a curfew of midnight, and he was given a chicken cutlet to cook for himself within a certain time. So he came back the next day. And so I need people to understand that the volunteers who are down there and fighting pretty aggressively at this point, we're doing it because we see it as our responsibility to take care of our community. And so we are calling on the people who have been assigned responsibility, and we are saying, please accept responsibility. And please acknowledge that there is a major lack of coordination and coordinated access is what's missing in all of this. And that responsibility lies on the End Homelessness organization. And I know that they have been working hard and fighting against government because they up until now they were a federal municipal organization that didn't have ties to the provincial government, which in my opinion worked really well because they were able to hold them accountable. But ever since they started receiving government funding, which is for the Comfort Inn, they've stopped advocating. They don't advocate. They don't have anyone with lived experience at the table. I was supposed to be on this task force. Myself and Mark were supposed to be at that table with residents of Tent City because that was our goal, was to make sure they had a say in the decisions that were made for them. And the individuals who are paid and being praised in the media for being the professionals who know what they're doing are not showing up for the individuals they're responsible for. And I'm sorry if this is not personal. I'm not getting paid to do this. This is not my job. So I'm not here to be the one to make sure that things happen. I see my role here as someone to ensure that the people who are paid, elected, and responsible for taking care of these human beings that exist beyond the 5-point housing plan, beyond the Comfort Inn. These are human beings who deserve to be treated with dignity. They deserve to have their voices heard. And so the federal housing advocate is working with the federal government right now to build a plan that's going to be released in the next coming months that's based on her consultations and the report that she released in February. And so everything that government is doing right now is violating the recommendations that came out of that plan. And so I have a real problem with that. And very few people are making sure that this information is in the public realm. And so right now, that's what I see my role as.
Fair enough, Robin.
Sorry.
Simply because of the time on the clock, we'll have to leave it at that. But this situation is far from settled or solved, and I appreciate your call.
Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, there we go. Let's take our final break of the morning. Roger, next to talk about the mining industry. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 1, Roger on the air.
Morning, Patty.
Good morning. How are you? Okay, you.
Good, great. It's been a while. Patty, I guess David might have misunderstood me wanting to speak about people buying gold, but certainly not mining, as in the word mining. What I did call to speak about is our companies that come into Newfoundland, run across the province, and purchase people's personal gold products, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And look, as you're aware, I've been in that business for most of my life. I own a pawn shop, a second-hand store. I bought and sold before I moved out here to Paradise. And, it's been my experience most of the time that the local companies, and this is a promotion of the local companies. I don't want to be tearing too many strips off the companies that come in here. That's not what I'm about to do, but I want to present the facts. The local companies, support businesses, hire people, and pay a higher percentage. Back in the 90s, I was paying 80-odd% of whatever the spot price of gold was. So if you came into me with $100 worth of gold, I gave you $80-something for it. There's local companies right here now in St. John's that are paying 93%. The last time one of the companies came in with the flyers, you'll see them in the mail, and I went there with some gold to see what they were paying. They asked me, well, how much did I want for it? And I said, well, no, what are you offering? and they insisted that they wanted me to tell them a price. Well, what it turned out, they were offering me 43%. So this is more of a buyer beware message. Look, fair is fair. If you got some stuff to sell, sell it. But make sure you're getting the right price for it, the right value for it. And there, it's only to check the internet, local scrap gold buyers. Every jewelry store buys it. Every one of them will buy your scrap gold. Local companies like East Coast Coins purchases it. These guys are in business here in Newfoundland and are going to pay you top dollar. They're not going to pay you 40% or 43 or 44%. And I see this happening every time. And I just roll my eyes and think, the people that have pieces of broken chains or gold or whatever they have, old earrings or whatever, really don't realize that they could get double or more just by doing a little bit of investigation.
Well, that's like everything else in this world. You got to know what you're getting yourself into. You get a bunch of quotes before you pull the trigger. You got to shop around whether or not you're trying to sell your own personal gold, what have you. And I mean, the thought in the gold world is that we're heading to $3,000 an ounce. I think the spot price this morning was, I have a look at those things for better or worse, it was around $2,200. I mean, gold is out of control, expensive.
It's over $3,000. I'm sorry for interrupting. It's over $3,000 right now, Canadian.
Yeah, I'm talking spot price Americans is $2,300 USD, which everything is traded in U.S. dollars, but yeah.
I understand, absolutely. No, Patty. And look, there are people with selling off an estate, and I've witnessed it where people have gone into these shops and got offers of $1,500, $2,000, and later came telling me, about the money they got, and I said, well, you probably could have got $10,000 if you had a shop local, and they were flabbergasted. And I said, yes. I said, I would have paid you. I would have paid you that much money, and here you sold it for peanuts. And they just don't know. So, this is a word to the wise, a word to beware. Look, if you're intending to avail of these services, make sure you're getting the top dollar. Don't let them tell you what what you want. Whatever the spot price is, they're going to pay a percentage. Make sure it's a fair amount.
Fair enough, because people just will sometimes take the first opportunity as opposed to really have a firm understanding that someone just down the road that actually has a storefront versus a traveling roadshow can indeed pay a bit more. Good PSA to polish off the show, Rod. Appreciate your time this morning.
Hey, buddy, listen, it's always a pleasure. You take good care.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, there we go. Very quick check-in on the Twitter box. People have been asking me to get some updates regarding some hydro-related matters. We can do exactly that, so stay tuned for it. Final check on the email. It's openline@vocm.com. And just a friendly reminder, if I don't get back to you right away, it's because I'm trying the best I can to clear up the backlog. Another quick note, if you send me an email via your text, your cell phone number, I can't reply. So if you're going to send me something, please do indeed send it from an email address. All right, good show today. Big thanks to everyone who supports the program, and we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning, right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.
Hey, it's Ryan Seacrest. Life comes at you fast, which is why it's important to find some time to relax. A little you time. Enter Chumba Casino. With no download required, you can jump on anytime, anywhere for the chance to redeem some serious prizes. So treat yourself with Chumba Casino and play over 100 online casino-style games, all for free. Go to ChumbaCasino.com to collect your free welcome bonus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.